In this video, we're going to see how we can keep track of when records were created and who created them, as well as who made the most recent modification to records on an Oracle table using a trigger. The context for this example is a small family counseling practice that we've worked with in prior examples. And again, we'll be working with the table to schedule counseling sessions for clients. So let's take a look at that table. Here's the way that we've created it in the past. It has the data that the company needs to manage the process. But what we'd like to do is add 4 additional columns to be able to keep track of when the records are created and when they're updated. So the first one we'll add will be called create date. And our intention will be just to be able to stamp the system date into this create date column when the record is first created. As well as we'd like to record who was the logged in user who created that record. We'll also bring in the change date and the user who changed that record. And we'll keep track of that then using triggers. We'll go ahead and create this table. And let's insert a record so we can take a look at it. Now the trouble is that this table is now so wide it doesn't display well on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and select the first half of the columns, appointment ID up to the duration. We'll display that. And I'll have a separate select statement. It will bring the appointment ID and the rest of the columns so we can see it. So here's what we see, that we've made this first appointment. The counsel will be Quinn Fowler, client ID number 100. And we have the room, start date and time, and a duration. But our additional columns down here, the create date, created by, change date, and changed by, are blank. And while we could have inserted those, our intention here is to be able to have Oracle insert those automatically so that the user doesn't have to worry about it, the system doesn't have to worry about it, no application has to worry about it. The database management system will do it without anyone having to think about it. And so the information that we're going to need to do that is, we'll have to see how to read the current date from the system clock. Well, that's pretty straightforward. It's just select sysdate. Sysdate's the function that brings that. When we select something from dual is just a table that has a single column and a single row. So we can use it to see the value of a function like sysdate. And so it tells me that's the current date from the system clock. There's a similar approach for getting the current logged in user. It's just user. So we can take a look at that. And we see that the currently logged in username is Gov. Well, armed with this information, we're ready to create a trigger. And so we'll say create trigger and give it a name. Recall that this will fail if the trigger already exists. And so we're going to use the alternate syntax, create or replace trigger, and then use that same name. And so now we're ready to indicate when we want the trigger to fire. So we want this to fire as a record's being inserted, but before the data actually gets to the table. And so that's the begin insert event, or the before insert event. And then we specify the table we want it to insert on, and so that'll be the appointment table. So now this trigger is going to fire as a record is being inserted into the appointment table, but before it actually gets to the table. Since some insert statements can insert more than one record at a time, we'll also specify that we need this to execute for each row. So if multiple rows come in, we'll run this for each one to be able to get that information and plug it in. Now we're ready to begin the work of the trigger, and it's really a pretty simple trigger. What we're going to do is we are going to refer to the new value of the creation date. So as the record's coming in, we're going to look at that value and establish a new value for it. The assignment statement that we'll use is : equals, and then we'll use the sysdate function. So what this is going to do is it's going to set the new value of the create date column as that record's coming in. So whatever was there before, we're going to write right over the top of it by assigning the system date to it. And we'll do something similar for the username. That's really all it takes for this trigger. So we'll execute this trigger and create it. Now let's go ahead and enter in some data and see what that trigger has done for us. Again, we'll select out both halves of the table so we can see it. Now we've added 2 more columns, or 2 more appointments, both for Quinn Fowler. And we've got the dates and times here, but now you'll notice on these 2 newest records that we've automatically added in the date and time that the record was created, as well as log the username who did it. And so that's pretty good. Step 2 now is to be able to add another trigger that executes when the record gets updated to be able to record who changed it. So we'll do another create or replace trigger. This one we'll call appointment modification. Very similar to the last one, except we won't be doing it on insert. Instead, we'll be doing it on update and on the same table. So now we're ready to indicate that we're doing this for each row and to begin the trigger. And so here we'll be reading the sys date for the new change date and the user for the new changed by, and we'll create that trigger. Now we'll just update a record. So we're going to update record number 2. So this one here, next time we display it, should have changed date and changed by information in it. And let's just take a look. So now we can see that that trigger has fired on the update event, and it has a date and time when this was initially created, and then at the most recent time that it was changed and who changed it. And so that's how we can use triggers to be able to record both when records are created as well as when they're modified.